The media never asks a tough follow-up question of these charlatans. Mike Pence was never asked, where does Jesus drive the gay wedding cakes out of the temple, right? Media allows segregationists like Jerry Falwell to be presented as Christian leaders, and they never question it. I'm tired of the frauds. I'm tired of MAGA pretending you can follow Donald Trump and Jesus. You can't. The only thing they have in common is they spent a lot of time around prostitutes and they both used ghostwriters. That's it. So this is a guide for any believer of any religion or any atheist or any agnostic on how to use the Bible when debating the Christian nationalist or right-wing fundamentalist in your job, your family. So I hope to be banned in Florida by November. That's my goal.
This is Black Man Spy.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Nance, and this is Black Man Spy. Welcome to this week's episode of Black Man Spy. I'm glad you're joining us. This week we have a really fascinating spiritual journey episode with John Fugelsang. John Fugelsang is an awesome guy. I know him personally. My favorite part about him is that he was murdered on CSI. And he was also picketed by the the Westboro Baptist Church. I mean, talk about two bookends in your life, right? He's a Drama League nominated actor, comedian, broadcaster who hosted many TV shows and podcasts, including the acclaimed Tell Me Everything series on Sirius XM Progress, and new podcast, The Oath and The Office. He's gotten George Harrison to give his final performance on VH1, debated Jerry Falwell and David Duke, and made many appearances on MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN. His newest book, Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds, is now out. I just got a copy. We talked about it, and they shipped me one. And with that, welcome John Fugelsang to Black Man Spy.
John Fugelsang, welcome to Black Man Spy. I finally have you on my territory. I'm so glad to see you. I love seeing you. I love hearing you. You are truly one of the most enlightened people that I know in the progressive talk world.
And put away the grease gun, pal. Put away the grease gun. I'm already a fan. My God. Thank you.
No, well, you're not just erudite. You're very well spoken, and there's no one that can hold a candle to you in a debate. And what I find funny is why these right wingers. You're sort of like me. I don't get attacked anymore, and I don't get asked to debate anymore. They used to come out, I'm going to debate you. Do they do that with you? Are you constantly asked to debate? I don't see it.
No. In fact, I told all the publicists and all the guys at Simon & Schuster, they were talking about all the shows they wanted to book me on. And I was like, can you guys just please, every like racist with a podcast in his mom's basement that J.D. Vance visited in 2024, can I go do those shows? Can I go to every right-wing, regressive, bigoted, because that's who I want to talk to. That's the most fun. The people who are the ones ruining the Christian religion, who generally haven't read the Bible all that much, and they're counting on you not having read the Bible all that much. When I was younger, my mom and dad were clergy before they married. My mom was a nun who worked with lepers in Africa as a nurse for many years. My dad was a Franciscan brother who taught history in Brooklyn. And my parents never wanted me telling people about their clergy past, so I kept it a secret. So like in my 20s, I go on Bill Maher all the time, and Bill would have me debating like Jerry Falwell and David Duke. And it was amazing for me, but I couldn't and they booked me for the Christian stuff, but like I couldn't come out and say what my parents had been. And Bill was cool about it. He didn't ever tell. But it was only after I debated Jerry Falwell. And I talked to my mother, and my mom gave me permission for the first time because I said, look, I'm not going to claim to be a great Christian or even a good person. But I'm sick and tired of seeing my parents' religion, this movement based on love and empathy and service and looking out for the rest of us, not acquisition of power, but what Christianity was supposed to be. I'm sick and tired of seeing that used as a cloaking device for hate for these blow-dried televangelists and warmed-over segregationists who don't actually follow Jesus and just worship power And they're counting on the rest of us not knowing the Bible that well. And you know this, Malcolm, the media is complicit. The media never asks a tough follow-up question of these charlatans. Mike Pence was never asked, where does Jesus drive the gay wedding cakes out of the temple, right? Media allows segregationists like Jerry Falwell to be presented as Christian leaders, and they never question it. I'm tired of the frauds. I'm tired of MAGA pretending you can follow Donald Trump and Jesus. You can't. The only thing they have in common is they spent a lot of time around prostitutes and they both used ghostwriters. That's it. So this is a guide for any believer of any religion or any atheist or any agnostic on how to use the Bible when debating the Christian nationalist or right-wing fundamentalist in your job, your family. So I hope to be banned in Florida by November. That's my goal.
I got to tell you, because I love the title, Separation of Church and Hate, A Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalist, Fascist, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. And the alliteration one is awesome. But two, the money that I am seeing now that is flying around from people who I once knew who were really good Christians. I had a good friend of mine, used to work in the military. He was a consultant for the Department of Defense, used to teach English in Bethlehem.
Wow.
It's just an amazing person, jumped deeply onto the Trump train. Very intelligent. But then again, one of his best friends was a nuclear engineer who literally would point up and say, oh, they're doing heavy chemtrails today. So, it just goes to show that, the average person, no matter what your level of intelligence, given enough propaganda, given enough, how can I put it, enough affiliation with a particular group, in this case, white males, right? You can be brainwashed into anything. And this guy voted for Trump, quote unquote, because I'm a Christian. And I use the arguments you use, right? Which are, why would you vote for a guy, right? Who ...
I ask one question of all of them, Malcolm. I say, please give me one actual teaching of Christ that Donald Trump or the MAGA movement or the Republican Party have fought for in this century. Give me one. And you'll find out really quick how little these people know about the Bible. The top answer I get is abortion. He's against abortion. And that's what I got to explain. Jesus wasn't against abortion. He was against the death penalty. Y'all don't agree with Jesus on these things. The Bible itself is not against abortion. God never has Moses or Jesus or Paul or any of the prophets come out against terminating a pregnancy, because abortions are legal and free in Israel right now, because Jesus' religion of Judaism never bans abortions. God asserts in Exodus 21 that a fetus is property, and a woman's life has more value in his eye than a fetus. And Numbers 5, God actually gives detailed abortion tips for unfaithful pregnant wives. So no, but it was in the 1980s, Malcolm, that they managed to, there's no group easier to manipulate than right-wing white guys. It was in the late 70s, early 80s that they realized they had lost on civil rights. They had lost on voting rights. Nixon left in disgrace. The evangelicals, they spent the 70s fighting Jimmy Carter's IRS because Carter wanted to take tax-exempt status away from universities that were still practicing racial segregation in the 70s. So, Ronald Reagan campaigned more about Jimmy Carter's IRS than about abortion. When Roe v. Wade was decided, Falwell never mentioned it for 5 years in public. It wasn't controversial, but once they realized that it was a means to power, then it became the most... Now, if they wanted to end abortion, they'd make birth control more available. They'd have greater sex ed. They don't care. They want power. And so that's the number one reason. 2 generations of Christians, they got them to vote against everything Jesus talked about by talking about abortion, which Jesus never talked about.
Right.
Then they'll say immigration, the illegals. And I like to call the migrants Christian refugees, Malcolm, because it pisses off the right people.
Yeah. Okay, first off, Latinos, the most church-going Catholic members in America, second only to Haitians.
Christian refugees. They can't.
Christian
refugees. He has a color. But again, when they say the immigration, it's like, well, where do you get this from? And see, I wrote this book, Malcolm, because you don't have to argue with your right-wing loved ones or coworkers. Make them argue with the Bible. Make them argue with God. What I say is, the God of the Hebrew Scriptures commands us to welcome the stranger, commands the Israelites to treat the alien as one of your own and never to mistreat them or charge them interest. And then his son Jesus comes along, and you don't have to believe any of this is literal fact. It's just the book we're talking about. Jesus in Matthew 25 says individuals and nations will be judged, heaven or hell, by how they welcome the stranger. So I just say, please tell me why I should listen to you and Donald Trump and reject God and Jesus. You don't need to fight them. Make them fight God.
Because Donald Trump held up a Bible once on the street, upside down in plastic. But they don't care. It's performative religion.
All of it.
Right? And I mean,
it's about humility. Christ's whole movement is about servant leadership, and the last shall be first, not total right-wing domination of your school board. Like, they don't even know what it's supposed to be about. They hate the New Testament, Malcolm, as much as they hate the Bill of Rights.
Right. So my question and to you is, so we have this evangelical movement in the United States that arguably has read the slave Bible, right? The one where they took out all the good things Jesus and Moses did and have created, and I wonder if there actually exists. I'm sure there's a version that's been hidden away in the Vatican somewhere, which is the corporatist Bible, all right? I mean, if fascism, for example, by Mussolini is quote unquote, a dictatorship of the corporate right led by a strong man.
Exactly. That was his definition. Yep. Corporate disposal of government. That's how Mussolini defined it. Welcome to the lobbyist lab.
So we're at a point where evangelicals in the United States have taken on the role that the Catholic Church took on by supporting fascist Italy and Germany. So how does a person, besides reading your book, which I highly encourage everybody to read, because you are very, very sharp in the counterpoints, I used to call the New Testament Jesus' owner's manual. And I would say, according to Jesus' owner's manual, you're doing this all wrong, right? You're putting oil in the antifreeze tank, and you're trying to drive a vehicle with square wheels. Everyone wants to do combat with people that are armed with those things, but it's just the basics of the man that's Jesus Christ. They have literally turned Jesus Christ into the Jesus from the movie Dogma, right?
Yeah.
Look at his thumbs up. Yeah, the shooter.
I mean, yeah, it's the alpha bro ass kicking Christ that doesn't actually appear in the Bible. Very white, hates the same people you hate. I do a whole chapter in here about gun safety and about this whole macho, toxic masculinity Jesus that I think really began with the Crusades, when it stopped being a movement about love and empathy and kindness, and suddenly Deus Vult, Pete Hegseth's favorite phrase, God wills it, meaning
God wills.
Forget all the stuff Jesus said. God wants us to go slaughter these Jews and Muslims to reclaim the holy. So Jesus' teachings don't matter. And that's when it began, what we now call Christian nationalism. They don't listen to Jesus. They don't believe in his teachings. They're here to fight for him, not to obey him. And this continued through now. And that's the whole history of Christianity, Malcolm. You know, you from the time Rome took over and it stopped being a persecuted little sect, it became a big imperial religion that persecuted other people. Christians are responsible for so much of the evil, from the doctrine of discovery and what Columbus did to the indigenous folks, American slavery, the Holocaust, segregation, homophobia. But throughout all of this, it's always been the Jesus followers who have pushed back against the Christians. Slavery was put up by Christians, and they bastardized the story of the son Ham and the story of Noah to justify it. Jesus came to break the chains. They don't want to hear that. They go to the Old Testament to justify slavery. And it was Christ followers like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, the Quakers, who fought back against the Christians. We had segregation, and they propped that up with Christianity. And it was a Baptist minister from Atlanta, and MLK shamed white America with their own Bible. We saw this throughout the workers' rights, and Dorothy Day and the Catholic worker movement fighting for an end to child labor and for a 7-day work week. We've seen it with so many people who've talked their parents and grandparents out of so much homophobia in the last 30 years. There is an incredible history of Christian activism in this world, and it has always manifested itself in resistance to Christian authoritarianism. Always.
One of my favorite, I grew up Catholic. I was raised in Catholic elementary school from kindergarten all the way up to high school, was going to go to a Catholic university. And, but the thing that happened to me to change my entire perspective of Jesus and the Jesus narrative, because, when you're a Catholic, you're being hit over the head with a book, right? And they put you through ritualistic a series of rituals to make you constantly, have muscle memory of what they want you to do.
The fan club has a lot of secret handshakes that Jesus never designed. Yes.
Yeah, that's for sure. One of which is, fingering your palm by Catholic priests. But my late wife was from Montreal, and she very, very early on was just like, hey, let me clarify some things here. We absolutely, every Canadian Quebecer, all right, absolutely detests the Catholic Church. I mean, they won't do nothing up there that's related to the church. There's a church in the town of Sherbrooke, which was one of their largest Catholic churches, that is now a rock climbing center.
I believe it.
Where they put up lines and you can climb the inside of this church because they don't care about the overwhelming use of Catholicism as a weapon system. Right into the 1980s, literally turned everyone in that province off. Yes, they're French. Yes, they speak French. Yes, every tiny little village they live in starts with the word saint. And everything as a reminder of the Catholic Church. Sure. But they just do not like that at all. I mean, they just want nothing to do with their faith.
Happening here too. Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening here. And you know what? Their grievance is not with the teachings of Jesus. Their grievance is not with God or the miracles or Santa Claus. Their grievance is with the hypocrisy of organized religion, the hypocrisy of men in dresses and funny hats, telling them who's a sinner and who's bad and what hoops you have to jump through. Look, if your church is telling you who your enemies are, instead of to love your enemies, you're not in a real goddamn church. It's really simple. And we see it now in America with this exodus. 2022, Malcolm, was the first year that we dipped under 50% for religious participation in this country. It's not because they don't like Jesus. Right-wing Christianity is an atheist factory. And that is why so many young people are turned off. Now, if a church wants to survive, I mean, preaching against racism, preaching against homophobia, fighting for the least of us, promoting responsible economic stewardship of the planet and its resources, a living wage, healthcare for all, no wars. These are really popular issues with young people that are very good for our economy and go very well with the teachings of Christ. But if a church just wants to keep filling the pews with homophobes and people who think the government should force women to be pregnant against their will has something to do with Jesus, then they're going to die off, and we're witnessing that right now.
Yeah. The thing that I find amusing is, as I said a little earlier, the greatest influx of people to the Catholic Church, speaking in my world, were the Haitians, were the Latinos here in the United States, right. Sub-Saharan Africa. But on the other hand, you do have these micro groups of Sub-Saharan Africans, West Africans, Ugandans, Kenyans, who are evangelicals. Oh, yeah. Every one of whom is a targeted race for the Trump administration. That's right. Considering that Jesus himself was an anchor baby who was born during the leaving. By the way, been all over Israel. In fact, for this book that I've been writing on and off for 10 years, where I literally have to walk the path of Jesus's 3-year evangelism.
Oh, right.
It gives you a very different perspective, especially when you go to a town like Nazareth, which is about 85% Catholic or Christian Arabs in Israel. I mean, every person there, for every 8 people that walk by you, they're Christians, and it's a rockin' town. I mean, it's a huge town, but as my point that I was trying to make a little earlier, when I was in high school, the thing that really brought me back to an image of Jesus the way I think he originally was the movie, not the I didn't get to go to Broadway, the movie Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right on.
Because it's the only rendition that has put Jesus correctly within the political framework of what was happening. And there's some things that people don't seem to understand. I mean, I'm a counterterrorism guy, national security guy, so I see it from that perspective. Judas was Judas Iscariot. Iscariot, right? Judas of Iscariot. Judas of the Sicarii. The Sicarii were an assassination group. They were the Al-Qaeda of their period. They would murder Roman soldiers with a short sword, the Sicarii. They would blow up granaries, which, until I got in the military, I didn't know that you could make flour blow up if you sifted it in the air and set fire to it. So they blew up granaries all around Judea. And then on the other side, I think, was it 3 of the apostles were zealots?
Yes. Well, Scorsese covered that in his movie, too, in The Last Temptation of Christ. He went into politics quite a bit about it. But, we're not, in that, St. Paul, when he's still Saul of Tarsus, is shown being a resistance terrorist to drive the Romans out, being a true zealot, which isn't in the Bible, but it's cool storytelling. Jesus grew up under European military occupation and oppressed people in a little town. I have a whole piece in the book how Nazareth is, when Donald Trump made his shithole countries comment, that's Nazareth, no major trade routes, middle of nowhere, only about 80 people, no public buildings during Jesus's time. And we're taught about, and Jesus goes on this 3-year campaign of preaching, not directly against the Roman Empire, directly against the conservative parts of the religious establishment, and indirectly against the Roman Empire, saying the kingdom of God is at hand and the meek will inherit the earth. That could have gotten him killed, all right? Like, he was very anti-authority. And conservative religious authority was what Jesus stood up to time and time again. The members of the religious establishment who were so much more focused on their rituals than on mercy and love, the wealthy who didn't care about the poor, the capitalists of the temple trying to, get more interest out of the poor people, and of course, the European occupying army that was spreading itself too thin, leading to its own collapse. Conservative religious power is what Jesus stood up to, and our right-wing friends have been suckered for centuries into aligning themselves with authoritarian power, it, which is the Christian way. But again, we're taught all this as kids before we're old enough to know what any of this crap means.
Well, I just found it fascinating that there were these 2 factions that joined Jesus, the zealots, who were the arguably the Taliban of their time, right? And then they had a Sicarii in there, each one of them trying to get Jesus to be the Osama bin Laden, the spiritual leader of their movement to have a revolution. What I liked most,
you gotta watch the Scorsese movie because Harvey died.
I'm gonna have to watch that version because I like to sing Jesus Christ Superstar. So I did Simon Soshi's in there, makes it very clear when he comes back for Palm Sunday, right? We add a touch of hate of Rome, you will rise to a greater power. We will win ourselves a home, right? And then you have Judas Iscariot, right, who is following him as a social justice warrior, who has literally been sent to tell Jesus, come join us in Barabbas and we'll start slitting some effing throats. And Jesus goes against everyone. The zealots, the Sicarii, the Pharisees themselves, and branches off into another place. And this is one place that I have a very hard time explaining to Christians. He wasn't a Christian. He was a rogue Jew.
He was a radical Reformed Jew, and in Scorsese's movie, which is based on the Greek novel, not on the actual Bible, Harvey Keitel plays Judas, and he's just berating Jesus the entire time for not resisting the Romans more fiercely. It goes deep into politics, and it's fascinating. But yeah, you're right. This was the world he was in, but Jesus consistently refused violence. The whole Sermon on the Mount, turn the other cheek. It's not just him overturning the death penalty. It's him breaking all ancient cycles of violence. When he says to forgive those who persecute you, to these Jews who are being oppressed by the Romans, you want to talk about a tough room? Forgive and love the people who are persecuting you? But he was consistent. When he's finally dead, and they all kill him, his friends kill him, Sell him out, deny they know him. The cops, the government, the religious bosses, the soldiers, they all kill him. The people who are hailing him on Palm Sunday are demanding his death by Friday. That's the part of the story that's beautiful. They all kill him. It's not just the Jews. It's the Italians more than anyone. Let's be honest. It's the Romans. And his last words before he dies are asking God to forgive them all. He does not want revenge. He is opposed to vengeance. His whole mission is about breaking ancient cycles of violence. I can't believe these right-wingers pretend they follow this guy, Malcolm.
Does this frustrate you so much? Because when I argue with these guys and it gets on religion, my generic fallback is Jesus would whip your ass.
Yeah.
Literally with a...
Ask him. Just ask him. Tell me the Jesus teaching, chapter and verse that Trump has ever fought for. Ever. And they can't do it. They haven't read the book.
So which gets us to this argument of Donald Trump being the Antichrist. Now, of course, I don't believe in every part of the mythical tale that has been spun, but this guy checks all the boxes.
No, he
doesn't.
Tell us about it.
Okay, Trump's not the Antichrist. Christ is the anti-Trump. Technically, the Bible says the Antichrist is anyone who doesn't believe in Jesus' divinity. So maybe it could be Trump. But at the end of the day, you know this better than me, Mr. Nance. Trump doesn't believe in anything. That's why I can't really call him a fascist. The movement's fascist, but Trump believes in me. Trump believes in sex, compliments, and money. He doesn't really have an ideology beyond that. So I don't feel comfortable. I don't think he's earned the right to be the Antichrist, because the Antichrist, when they come, they're not coming here just to bang hookers and make a fortune on crypto.
Well, okay, granted, I will give you that. But the Christian evangelicals have this theme now. And they're calling him King, is it King Croesus?
King Cyrus. The flawed vessel theory. They're saying, well, God sometimes God picks an imperfect messenger to deliver his message. So I say to them, okay, I'll repeat the question. What teachings of Jesus is this imperfect messenger actually fighting for?
Yeah, but they fall back to the Old Testament. I love the way that they border dance between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Sometimes I think they get so twisted up, they technically end up in the Quran.
Well, that's why I get them angry, because I say Christians aren't supposed to follow the Bible. Christians follow Christ. And they'll weaponize parts of the Bible they don't believe, Mr. Nance, as you know. They'll say, well, be gay, men with men's an abomination, Leviticus 18. Well, Leviticus is for the Jews who've just escaped bondage and are trying to survive in the desert for 40 years. It's about keeping your numbers up. That's why God says no sex on your period, no incest. It's about making babies, not hooking up with your guy friends. That's the whole point. But they want to believe this, and it's like, I say Jesus brought a new covenant. Leviticus doesn't apply to Christians. Nope, it's in the Bible. Just to do it. So then I'm like, all right, then. Leviticus 20:10 commands you to stone adulterers to death. So you go gather the rocks, and I'll let the Secret Service know you're on your way to Mar-a-Lago. Because if you're going to weaponize a part of the Bible you don't believe in to hurt a minority that Christ commands you to love, then you got to stone Donald Trump to death for adultery. It's right there in the book. They don't believe it. They don't follow it. And it's time for us to call them out. You don't need to believe the Bible is literal fact to use it to call out these frauds, because they've weaponized it for hundreds of years. They are trying to force their narrow version, their narrow right-wing Christ-free version of this into our schools, into our media, into our government, our culture, our entire civilian infrastructure. They have a First Amendment right to twist scripture and lie about it. And we have a First Amendment right to call them the hell out for it using that book they wave around like a prop. They don't follow it. It's really easy, and you'll be surprised how good it feels.
Well, now that we've gone through your book, and I'm dying to read it. I am dying to read this.
There's a copy coming to you. It should have come by now. Those bums at Simon and Schuster. I'll crack it.
I could have gotten you. I could have given you a blurb on the back. You got my buddy Roland Martin on there, and Anita Baker. Is that Anita Baker, the singer?
Anita. Oh, let me tell you, Black Twitter's gonna love. I got a Roland Martin. I got Yvette Nicole Brown. I got Congresswoman Bonnie, and Miss Anita Baker came through for me. I couldn't believe it. So yes, I'm.
Wow.
Anita Baker.
That is a different first.
Anita Baker and Willie Nelson and Patton Oswalt all gave me quotes. I'm just going for a very diverse collection of humans here.
My God, that is just absolutely awesome. I'm completely jealous now.
Well, this is the most mainstream thing I've ever done, Malcolm. The book is so pro-Bible, pro-Jesus, pro-God, but I'm still going to get excommunicated and banned in Florida for it, because these Christians don't like hearing what's actually there. Nobody hates like a Christian who's just been told their hate isn't Christian.
Well, the problem is that I think that liberals and people who are actual followers of Jesus Christ have a hard time conducting, how do I put it, counter-evangelical warfare, right? And which I find funny because evangelicals know how to attack, gays, lesbians, blacks, whatever, and Muslims, which I find just hilarious. They always whip out the Muhammad as a pedophile because Aisha was a 14-year-old girl. It's like, okay, training time out, as we say in the military.
Yeah.
This is the Hijaz of Western Saudi Arabia.
Wasn't that like a peace treaty when you're settling a war and you trade women as property for marriage? I'm not mad about that. Just about the age. They're just married about the age of the girl because she was the exact same age as the Virgin Mary was when she got.
Oh my God, don't be getting them onto that. Let me tell you something. I have been to Istanbul. I have visited one of the contemporary shrines to Mary. This thing was built and tiled when she was alive living, I believe, down in Ephesus.
Amazing.
And they have in tile along the ceiling the story of Mary and Joseph of Arimathea. And they have Joseph as a long, white, bearded old guy like me, right, in the 60s, and her as an insanely nubile young woman who he disappears for however many months, 6 to 8 months or something like that. And as that old Australian advertisement says, it's kind of hard to compete with God.
But I have a whole chapter in the book called Thou Shalt Drop Thy Sex Hang-Ups, which goes into how they've demonized masturbation, but it's not in the Bible, and birth control, but that's not in the Bible. You know why there's not really a lot in the Bible about premarital sex? I mean, the only sexual sins Jesus cares about are harassing women and cheating on women and dumping your wife for no reason. But there's no talk about premarital sex because it didn't exist. You got married when you were 13 or 14. It wasn't a factor. So that's whenever I hear this talk about Muhammad and the child bride, I'm like, well, consider the time, man, and then consider who's defending pedophiles in this century, and let's put that entire issue to bed.
Absolutely, and they're always evangelical. They're all, if you want to get molested,
How dare you, sir? The Catholics spent years getting to the top of the pedophile heap, and you're giving the credit to the evangelicals?
Do you recall the South Park where the priest goes to Rome to complain about, altar boys being raped, and they were all like, "Oh wait, no, that's a perk of the job."
But I always thought that's a piece of the Roman Empire they've kept alive. One of my favorite stories is when Jesus heals the Roman centurion's slave. Well, and the apostles were like, "Why are you doing this? These guys are occupying us." And we're taught this story, and we're like, "Oh, Jesus was so nice. He even helped the Roman centurions who would go in to murder him." But when I got a little older and began researching the story, in the original Greek, the word they used wasn't slave; it was pais, beloved boy. And what do we know about the Romans? They left their wives at home. They brought a boy on the road with them.
Yeah.
So you can understand why the apostles would be kind of freaked out that Jesus was actually healing the male lover of a Roman centurion. But why else would an occupying general seek out a local mystic, homeless Jewish faith healer to come to his house to heal a common slave, unless that slave was much more than just a slave? I mean, it was all right there. And yet the hang-ups have obscured the story and the message and the love. And that's why this bigotry is considered piety. These people think they put up a tree in their house once a year and they hate gays and it makes them a good Christian. I've had it, Mr. Nance. And this book is a way to fight back.
Well, good, because we need anything we can get in counter-narrative warfare. Now, my question to you is, where are the Dr. Martin Luther Kings? Where is the, Southern Christian, what is it, SLCC?
Yeah. I mean,
where are the Christians in America, who are organizing and counterattacking with the true narrative of Jesus? Because I'll be honest with you, you're it. You're the only person I've seen at this level.
Reverend Barber and Moral Mondays, or like when
Reverend Barber, love him, friend of mine.
Yeah.
He does that, but he is studiously ignored by media. I mean, they go out of their way.
But that's how
The Reverend Barber is never platformed anywhere other than DPP or Roland Martin.
Exactly. Look, I mean, you should see my media tour. They'll have me when I'm a comedian telling jokes about Trump, but talking about this stuff, and they get scared right away. But this is why the media is culpable, because the media likes a villain. And growing up when I was a kid, I was taught this is a religion about service, about love, about empathy, and the least of these. But I turned on my TV and it was Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, Jimmy Swaggart. They were the opposite. These were the guys who never got upset about racism. They got upset about protests against racism. That's today's evangelicals. They're much more offended at Colin Kaepernick's knee than Derek Chauvin's. But they're villains. They get ratings. And that's why they were booked all the time. The nice Christians, the anti-war Christians, I mean, Malcolm, you ever go to a Labor Day parade? You know what the funny thing about Labor Day parades in New York City? You don't see the media. You don't see the helicopters. They don't cover Labor Day parades because corporate media doesn't want to amplify organized labor. It's the same thing. You talk about how the rich shall be last and the poor shall be first, and Jesus says individuals and nations have a moral responsibility to take care of the poor and the sick. Well, then they start calling you a communist and a Marxist and a socialist, and they get terrified of it. And this is the book we've all agreed on, folks. There's lots of guys like Reverend Barber. They can't get the airtime. The douchebags get booked.
I got to tell you, when I was a young counterterrorism guy, very early on, they put you through a curriculum of stuff that you have to read. And when I was doing Latin American terrorist groups, they were constantly hammering. I mean, we have this school at the John F. Kennedy School of Special Warfare. There's a counterterrorism program that they still teach down there. And when it comes to Christians involving themselves with, with terrorist activities, they don't discuss the Irish Republican Army.
No,
not at all. There's nothing about, priests being being snitches, priests out there blessing the machine guns and hand grenades. All they talk about is revolutionary theology, right? Which is some hybrid, socialist, communist inspired. I think there's like one priest in Latin America who did it, and that was it. All Latin American counter-government, counter-fascist opposition became this terrorist base for all kinds of, of terrorism in Latin America. And the funny thing is, when you study it, you go, you're teaching me the ideology, but I don't see any of that. But I do see you killing priests and throwing them into pits, shooting nuns to death, and raping them and throwing them into pits in El Salvador, for example, which was our operation, which is an operation backed by U.S. intelligence. But why, in God's name, how have they so successfully done that? These are people who still, who wear Camp Auschwitz shirts. And Pinochet doesn't know wrong with pictures of them throwing people out of helicopters.
So January 6th. I mean, if you go by the dictionary, January 6th was terrorism, right? And they were pretending to be Christian, flying this absurdly Christian flag. But again, the media can't even use these words. Like, the Republican Party officially finds it acceptable to beat the crap out of cops for a lie. That's policy now. That's where they come from. And this is the essence of fundamentalism. Our atheist friends will say, oh, religion is responsible for all the oppression of women and homophobia and violence. And I had this fight with Bill Maher 100 times. I always say, no, it's the fundamentalist wings of all the world's religions do that. The overwhelming majority of moderate and liberal Christians, Jews, and Muslims are getting along just fine right now, all around the world, making businesses, making families, and they're not getting any hype for it. The douchebags get the hype. Fundamentalism of all religions deserves to be viewed as its own religion, because it doesn't matter. The more far the right you are in any religion, the more you have the same things in common. And I go into this in the beginning of the book. Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Christianity. Women are always second-class citizens. The more to the right, the more extreme conservative your religion is, the more God thinks 51% of us are a little bit unworthy. Number two, sex is bad unless it's for procreation. Women, gay people enjoying sex, very evil. Number three, violence is okay if my side does it, because I'm on the side of the one true God, and if you're against me, you represent Satan, so God won't feel bad if I commit violence on you. Number four, always a focus on punishment instead of healing. And number 5, a persecution narrative, victimhood that justifies any crappy thing you do. These 5 things show that right-wing Christians have more in common with right-wing Muslims than they do with moderate or liberal Christians.
Look, I've had to do operations, as I like to call it, as a tactical Muslim. I can pray to the best of them. I've read the Quran. When I was in Afghanistan on one of my first missions, the one imam who was close to Osama bin Laden, he didn't talk. No one talked to this guy. They just went flying by him up in Tora Bora. No one had a word with him. And when I came up, they were like, "Oh, black guy, Muslim." And we sat down. The first thing he asked me to do was read the Quran, right? Because he thought I was a Saudi or something.
Yeah.
And I read the Quran as perfectly as I could. To them, that was like heaven, right? It was reading the word of God and hearing the word of God in Arabic. That guy spilled like nobody's business. He's like, "Oh yeah, the Bible was just here."
That's it.
I'm like, "No one's talked to you." They wouldn't talk to a white guy.
But you engaged him on scripture, and that's why I wrote this book. Because look, if you just hate your racist uncle and call him a superstitious bigot, then he's going to think that he's more right than ever, and you're on the side of Satan. These people have been groomed for 30 years to believe that we all look down on them, the flyover country. Don't prove them right. Don't make them martyrs by proving them right on this. You know, I find if you engage on religion, and I wrote this book because I find if you sit with your racist uncle and you engage on the scripture, something funny happens.
Mm-hmm.
You probably won't sway them, but they may appreciate that you actually took the time and the respect to engage them on the book they claim to follow. Now, again, you won't convert them. You'll convert their wives, maybe their kids, the bystanders, people who are listening to the overall conversation. But I've come to really believe you'll get a lot farther showing them in the book that Jesus wasn't an immigrant-hating homophobe than if you just call your uncle an immigrant-hating homophobe. And look at the bond you made with that guy. Hardcore fundamentalist, but you treated him with dignity. A lot of these people, they get them out of a group, get them one-on-one and be nice to them and find the common humanity. The Bible can do that. And once you've done it, just say, where does Jesus justify your hatred of Jews or Muslims? Where is that backed up by this book? And it's got to be Jesus. Christians don't follow the Bible. They're supposed to follow Christ, not have this anything but Jesus loophole. So again, you won't sway them, but you'll make everybody else at the cookout realize, oh, this person, this woman, she knows what they're doing when you debate these folks because they're bullies and no one buys it. It's all authoritarian bullying. And that's why religion's on the outs in this country. People are sick of it. But I will say, that spiritual urge will never leave. And if there's one thing I've learned doing stand-up the last 20 years in this country, they say the largest growing religious demographic, Malcolm, are Mormons or maybe Islam or none of the aboves. I think the largest growing religious group in this country are people who were raised religious and now consider themselves spiritual because they're turned off to all the hypocrisies and lies of the men in funny hats. So I don't know if religion's going to survive or not, but I know that the teachings of Jesus and what the religion started out as are worth fighting for. They're good for the economy. They're good to get nice, better politicians elected. Right. And whether there's a God or not, they might still save us.
One of the fastest growing churches in the last 10 years was the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Yes.
Which started out as a joke to see if they could get legal status. And it has something like 3 million followers worldwide. I mean, in Europe, there are guys who actually wear colanders on their head because they claim it's religious headgear. And those governments have recognized it because it is an actual church. My question to you, if evangelicals can have these churches with, monster trucks and Cirque du Soleil, flying shows from the top, which are just insane to me. They're insane. These are the people up there, hands up in the sky, babbling, praying, babbling.
You see that? Oh my God. Joel Osteen is like so high up, he can almost see the class struggle from up here. Almost. Yeah. I mean, all pomp, all power, all showmanship, nothing that's actually in the book. It's all a business.
Do you watch I don't know if you're on TikTok very much, but there's a woman who's got her doctorate in theology, her TikTok handle is Veronica and Baby Boo.
I have seen that.
And her scene with Tracy, who is the admin secretary at the Pearly Gates. Mm-hmm. she does like Mike Johnson coming to heaven, or an ICE officer coming to heaven. And she does these brilliant renditions. And she has one where I believe it was Mike Johnson that came up to heaven. And, no, Mike Huckabee comes to heaven.
Better, even.
And she's typing them in and asking him these questions. Well, did you feed the poor? Ooh, you didn't. You went to Israel and you did this. And then she looks over, she goes, oh, sorry. Give me a minute. And this guy goes, hey, can I have a minute with this guy? And it's her dressed as Jesus. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I need to do a special intervention here, right? Like, I have some questions. Did you read anything I ever wrote? And it's hilarious. That is one of the funniest reckonings. I mean, what I find funny about some of these comedians who are doing this is about once every couple of months, it gets so serious, she has to come out of character and go, this is serious and we're in real trouble here. Right? You're laughing at my jokes about ICE agents coming into heaven or going down to hell, and this is really serious. You need to understand that we have a crisis going on. But one of the funniest TikToks I've ever seen.
I agree, but it falls to comedians and activists and writers and clowns like me to do this because the Democratic Party has ceded faith and religion to the right. The Democratic Party has stopped trying to compete. They've stopped trying to get the votes of Christians. They've given up on the issue. And Joe Biden's first 2 years, show me a president since LBJ who's had a platform that embodies more actual gospel teachings than that.
Right.
I mean, that they don't care. It's all about power. But the media is not going to do it. The media loves having their villains come on and get the click ratings and the hate watching. The media is not going to ask tough follow-up questions. Like, doesn't Jesus command us to love Palestinians and Israelis equally? Where does Jesus say the gays are bad? Where does the Bible say to persecute women who have abortions? And where do you get off calling these Christian refugees illegals? The media is not going to do it. It's not their job. The Democrats are too scared. So people who actually know the Bible have to be the ones to take the camouflage away from these frauds.
Which is my challenge to you. So when am I going to see the John Fugelsang megachurch? Because no, not joking.
No,
not joking.
Oh, I know.
Set up a tent in Central Park, right? Up in the upper northwest corner of it.
That's right.
Set up a tent down there just near Harlem and run a real church. And I'll freaking drive down there. Right. I drive down there for the blessing of the animals, and I would really I'm one of the people who was religious, lost it, right? And am now spiritual.
I think we're the majority, man. I think we're the growing majority in this country, and no one talks about it, right? Religion can suck, but you're not going to get rid of the spiritual hunger so many of us have. So many of us are never going to believe that all that exists is all we can see, hear, feel, and taste. There's much more to reality and existence that our tiny minds can, whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying you have to believe in God as an old white man with a big fuck off beard throwing lightning bolts down. Paintings have it. Exactly, but the Jews had their version of God. You experience it by getting out here and living. That's what the world Jesus grew up in. You be a mensch, you help people, and you'll feel the presence of God. When the Greeks translated it, they had the man with the white fuck-off beard throwing lightning bolts down, and that colored our impression of what God was. And we will never be able to measure the damage done by white Jesuses in illustrated Bibles of the 19th century. I mean, white Jesus, like inflated divinity with Caucasian good looks, and it reinstilled a feeling of racism and self-racism for people by associating whiteness with God. I mean, and it's based on nothing. Jesus was not blonde hair and blue-eyed. But you watch these movies, and in most of them, the Pharisees are the only ones who look Jewish. I mean, yeah. Jesus he looked like a guy who could never be cast to play Jesus in any movies of the 20th century.
Well, I look forward to the Church of the True Religion, run by John Fugelsang. I want an evangelical tent, a giant evangelical tent. You have my permission to take a $25 million executive jet deduction.
May I really? Oh, that's so fantastic.
And, well, because if you become a real, a true evangelist, which is to call people back to the true religion, of not just, it doesn't have to be of Christianity, it can be of Christ and his teaching. which is true.
My wife is so down for me starting a cult, you have no idea. Some tax exempt.
Not a cult. I mean, a real ass church that people can come to that you can use as the counter cudgel, and that's when you're going to get your debate. But I shit you not, get yourself a tent, set it up in Central Park. 1 million of us will start showing up there or watch the live.
Maybe you're right. Well, you know what? If there's one thing America needs,
the narrative back.
America needs a church with more dick jokes, and I'm here to step up and do that. No, thank you.
Help me, Jesus, as Joy Reid would always say. Thank you so much for coming on. I know we went long on this week's edition of Black Man Spy or the Church of John Fugelsang.
So good to see you. Please come back on my SiriusXM show some evening. For those who don't know, we're on SiriusXM Progress 5 nights a week. You can hear us as a free podcast all day long. And Malcolm, thank you for giving me so much hope and inspiration during this time. You know, I just appreciate men with compassion and guts, and that's what's going to win it, and that's what people want.
Well, I have one last request of you, which is I usually do some form of poetry on the outro. Can you give us a quote from the Bible that you would like to leave us with?
A quote from the Bible I'd like to leave you with. Wow, I should have prepared something funny because there's so much in it. I mean, at one point, St. Paul tells a joke about cutting off your own dick. That's really in there. Yeah, yeah, they should emasculate. It's about circumcision and emasculating yourself. I'll close it with what I opened it with Matthew 25, where Jesus talks about on the night he's arrested, how at the end of the world, when the apocalypse comes, the Son of Man will gather the individuals and nations. And it's like his memo to the Heritage Foundation. He literally says what you have to do to be a Christian society. And it's got nothing to do with how loudly you scream at women outside clinics or how cruelly you persecute trans children or migrants. Take care of the poor, take care of the sick, welcome the stranger, kind to those in prison. That's it. They don't want a government based on the values of Christ. They want their own Christian values. And what do they fight for? They claim victim over anything like we can't persecute gays, we can't teach about talking snakes in science class. Nothing that threatens conservative religious practice. Only things that threaten conservative Christian domination. Don't let them do it. The founders didn't want it. Jesus didn't want it either.
Well, thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you on your podcast. And everyone will rush out and go buy Separation of Church and Hate by John Fugelsang. Thanks, John.
Malcolm, always an honor. Thank you so much. And thanks to your audience.
Well, I'm glad we took that spiritual journey today. And unfortunately, while John and I were talking, tragedy struck. Right-wing influencer, podcaster, thought leader on the right-wing side, Charlie Kirk, was assassinated while we were speaking about God's spirituality and how it's seen. So we'll end this episode. And for those of you who understand my position, is there is no room for violence at all. There's a lot of dangerous rhetoric out there, but perhaps listening to John speak so informatively about the Bible and what Jesus really wanted, we can take some solace in that. With that, like I say every week, I will see you on the beach.